Hello and welcome to another video. I hope that you all had a good January, a good start to the year, and if you didn't, then it's all gonna be up from here. It's all gonna be great. I had a pretty good reading month at the start of the year. I think a good number. I read about 9 books, I think, in total. I think that's a good number. You know, not too many, not too few. Starting off strong on all my reading goals. So without any further ado, let's get to the books. The first book that I read this month, and the first book of 2022, and what a first book it was. One Verse Multi by Sander Santiago. I'm obsessed with this book. Completely obsessed. This is a sci-fi multiverse type of story and follows our main character, Martin, who works for the MVP, the Multiverse Protection Corporation. So he and his colleagues are in charge of making sure that universes don't collide, they don't cross over too much, that everything ticks over as it should. And they start working on a project, and one of the keys to the project is a guy that Martin may or may not have had a fling with kind of in the past. But he appears in nearly every single universe, and shenanigans ensue, sci-fi adventures ensue. They realise that the true enemy was capitalism all along. There's queer joy. It was glorious. It was glorious. It was so much fun. It was genuinely so thought out and clever, but not in a kind of like, this book is really clever sort of way, like in a whoa, that's ingenious kind of way when you're reading it. There were so many little touches. So like I loved how this, I've been thinking about this ever since I read this book. So Mandela effect. So we have Mandela effects, right? Where everyone, there's like a collective belief in something that hasn't actually happened, or that some people think of something as being opposite of what it was. And in this book, then Mandela effects happen when leak-throughs come from other universes, and like conscious thoughts spread through from other universes, and that's how you get Mandela effect. And I just thought that was a really nice like touch, that sort of thing the whole way through. It was genuinely witty, genuinely funny, and also had great sort of character arcs and storylines. There was a really diverse cast of characters. So the main character is black, trans and gay, and is in a polyamorous relationship, or the romance of the story is polyamorous. I thought I would like enjoy this book and it would be fun, and was not expecting to have such a good time with this book. It was glorious from start to finish. I cannot recommend it highly enough. And what a great start to the year. Continuing with the sci-fi theme, I then listened to an audiobook of This Is How You Lose the Time War by Amal El-Mottar and Max Gladstone. This was a reread for me. I read it for the first time a couple of years ago, loved it, and I had a long car journey at the start of the year, at the start of the month, and I wanted to listen to an audiobook, but I also wasn't in the mood to get stuck into anything particularly long. So I thought, you know what, I'll listen to this. I can get most of it done in one long car journey, and it was really nice to reread it and listen to it again. When I read it for the first time, I sort of like physically read it on my Kindle, and I think listening to it worked really well for a reread. This book is, I think, sort of notorious almost for having quite beautiful but dense language. Like it's a slow read. You need to like digest it word by word to figure out what's going on and to sort of appreciate it. So I'm very glad that I read it the first time so I could take my time over the words. But I think for a reread, then an audiobook was really nice, because I could just like let this beautiful language and beautiful prose like wash over me, and not have to pay too much attention to the plot, because I know what happens. Especially, you know, when you're in the car, you get to a tricky junction. I don't want to be suddenly behind on what's happening in the book because I'm not concentrating on that. So it worked really well for that. I think the audiobook for the first time round would have been a bit much, but for a reread, really liked it. The next book I read was a NetGalley arc, and that was Love and Other Disasters by Anita Kelly. This is a romance, and it's set on a cooking show, on a competition, and 2 of the contestants meet each other, have a bit of an instant attraction to each other, but you know, they're in this high pressure environment of being on a TV show, and things don't quite go to plan. I really enjoyed reading this book. The two main characters were really, really great, both really well written and complemented each other really well. So you have Dahlia, who is a recent divorcee and is kind of going on this show to hopefully like remake herself a bit. And London, who is out as non-binary and is the first openly non-binary contestant on the show. And so the book kind of also deals with what they deal with of being in the public eye and people judging them on Twitter and things like that. And I think the setting of being on that show was a stroke of genius. It was glorious. One of the downsides of romance for me, not necessarily a downside, just like, it always annoys me, and I don't think I'm the only one, that at the end it's the third act drama. We don't need so much third act drama. But in this, there was always drama because there are producers. There are literally producers meddling and trying to like maneuver situations and things. So I thought that was a bit of a stroke of genius to deliberately have the characters in a very manufactured situation. And that was kind of one of the main conflicts of the story. So I really enjoyed this one. It was a really, really fun queer romance. I set myself a challenge to read at least one non-fiction book every month this year, and this month I read The Five by Hayley Rubenhold. This is history. It is about the 5 women who were murdered by Jack the Ripper, and is their biographies and the stories of their lives rather than the stories of their deaths or their killer. In principle, the only thing that these 5 women have in common is that they were murdered by the same man. But what I thought was interesting in this book is spotting all the different threads that were similar in all of their lives that led them to that point. Given what we know of Jack the Ripper's killings, then for most of these women were sleeping on the streets in one particular area of London at night in the same sort of 2 or 3 year period, and you're inevitably going to have shared similar experiences going through something like that. So I think spotting those same things crop up, themes of violence in their lives, or alcoholism, or usually often being separated from their husbands and not having any legal standing or support. Seeing all of those themes was really, really heartbreaking, and just kind of brought home how vulnerable people are in those situations. Lots of non-fiction can be quite dense, and especially, this isn't going to be a cheerful read. I was a bit worried that it would be a slog to get through, but it was very readable. You could definitely sit down for an hour or so and just read a few chapters. And also, if you are thinking of picking this up but a bit intimidated by non-fiction, which I often am, which is why I'm challenging myself with this, then it's essentially 5 separate biographies. So you could read it as 5 mini books. You could read one, read something else, come back, read another one. So you can break it down quite easily, which I also quite liked, that I could sort of every couple of days be like, okay, I'm going to get to this point and then have a pause. So yeah, that's The 5. Then another NetGalley arc, Other Parents by Sarah Stovell. I have very mixed feelings about this book. The more I think about it, the worse it is. When it started, talk about a page turner. I read the whole thing in one day. I could not put it down. Every chapter ended with a twist or a reveal, and I was so caught up in this book and story. But it definitely kind of went off the rails a bit as the story went on. The story starts in a small town in the northeast of England, mostly an affluent area, but also some more deprived areas as well. And at the local primary school, then, war is brewing between the homophobic head of the PTA and one of the school's most generous but anonymous donors, she's recently separated with her husband, and her girlfriend has moved in with her, and the whole town, they're the gossip of the town. Everyone is obsessed with talking about this. I saw that description and was like, that sounds really interesting. I am sold. That wasn't really what the book was about, though. That's how it started, and then it just sort of snowballed into lots of other things, and most things never really got resolved. There were lots of plot inconsistencies, or not necessarily inconsistencies, but things that didn't feel believable towards the end, that just sort of let it down a little bit for me. especially when, as the story goes on, it deals a lot with vulnerable children and young people, and a lot of the main characters, most of the main characters are adults, a lot of them work in education, and they were not just unknowledgeable, ignore the siren getting past. There were moments when like a literal teacher was saying, oh, well, I can't do anything about that because it's not technically against the law. And I was like, yes, it is. And you're a teacher. A head teacher. You should know that. That did kind of let it down towards the end a lot, that it just sort of felt much more like it was there for the drama than for actually exploring the relationships of the characters. But I did enjoy the actual reading process of this book. I just got to the end and was like, huh? Then another arc, If I Were a Weapon by Skye Killane. This is a science fiction book and is set in sort of near future where aliens have crash landed and they're all gone, but some of the humans who were living nearby the crash site have been infected with nanites and effectively have superpowers. One of the humans who has these superpowers, she has visions of the future, and she goes off to go and try and rescue someone from a vision she sees of her, and they end up falling in love and trying to escape the bad guys together. It was a fun sci-fi romp. If you enjoy sci-fi, if you would like something quite sort of short and readable and absorbing, then this would be a good one to check out. The next book I read was Catherine of Aragon, the True Queen by Alison Weir, and I read this for my Tudor TBR challenge. So I challenged myself every month this year to read one of the Tudor books off my TBR, or books about the Tudors, I guess. This is historical fiction about Catherine of Aragon, who was Henry VIII's first wife. It's a chunky book. It is long, but I finished it. I read the whole thing. This has been intimidating me for a while, so I'm glad I read it. And it was so good. It was so good. It's a very slow read, a very slow burn, but worth it. It's so worth it. This story starts up as Catherine of Aragon is on her way to England to marry Prince Arthur, Henry VIII's older brother. And if you watch the Tudors, if you know anything about the Tudors and about Henry VIII, you will know how that ends. It does not end well. I mean, nothing with Henry VIII involved does, really. Yeah. What really struck me with this book is I got such a sense of how helpless she was, not by her own choice, but just in her situation, that she had done everything in her power and was doing everything in her power and fighting her corner, but there was nothing that she could do. That her husband said, this is how I want it to go. I will cause Brexit Mark 1 if I have to have my way, and she could do nothing. And I think that really struck me. Like, the emotional weight of that struck me with this book. If you are interested in the Tudors, I can't recommend this highly enough. I mean, Alison Weir is like the queen of all things Tudor. But this book was it was so great. And what I am intrigued for, because this is the first of a series of 6, one for each of the 6 wives. I am intrigued to see how her characterization of the different wives changes as we go on. So obviously this was from Catherine of Aragon's perspective and had a not so flattering depiction of Anne Boleyn. So I'm intrigued as to the Anne Boleyn book, as to how much of her character is going to be the same as Catherine's perception of her, how much is going to be different. I think that dynamic is going to be really interesting to see, especially from the same author. Then I read another historical fiction, How Much of These Hills Is Gold by C. Pam Zhang. This is an alternative Western in that it is set in the American West during the gold rush. Apart from that, it doesn't really resemble a Western very much, apart from the setting. But I guess that's a big part of the genre, I suppose. I have very mixed feelings about this book. I am very confused by this book. I don't really know what happened. I know what happened, but not exactly. The story starts following 2 siblings who are running away from home. both their parents are dead, and they're taking their father's body with them across the hills as they look for a new life. It was pretty gruesome. Some of it felt a bit unnecessary, a little bit gratuitous, to be like, yes, this is an adult book for adults. Okay, yeah, we get it, it's fine. There was a lot of time skipping in this book, which I enjoyed. I thought it worked really well, going back to when the parents met and their childhood and things like that. There was a big focus on the experience of the first Chinese immigrants to America, which I did not know much about, so that was really, really interesting and depressing, because they, on the whole, had a terrible time. And the sort of inequality of the gold rush, not just the inequality that we usually think of, but the way that the riches were literally taken away from some people and given to others. I really liked some of the themes in this book. I did not understand some of the other themes in this book. If you have read it, let me know. I'm very confused and need to talk to someone about it to figure it out, is the takeaway on that one. And the final book that I read this month was Hidden Warrior by Lynn Llewellyn, which is the second book in the Tamir Triad. And I did do a reading vlog where I read this book, so if you want more in-depth thoughts, then you can go and have a look there. I really enjoyed this. It was great. I always enjoy Lynn Llewellyn's writing. She's such an engaging writer. Her characters are just wonderful. They are glorious. Her world building is really, really great. You never get too bogged down with it. You just kind of get sucked into it, even if some of it is a bit weird at times. This one, it's the second in a trilogy, so definitely had that vibe of like, this book is setting everything up for the third book, which the vast majority of trilogies do. But otherwise, I mean, I still enjoyed it. I'll still read the last one. I'm really enjoying the character arcs. A lot happened at the end. It was like a lot of thinking and talking and general high fantasy stuff, and then at the end loads happened and some of it was a bit odd. But I'm intrigued to see what happens next. Those are all of the books that I read in January. Let me know what you read in January. Give this video a like if you enjoyed it, all of those things, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.